So, the first time I saw Akira Kurosawa's Redbeard, I remember it being really long and a bit slow. But when the end credits came, I remember feeling something, and it actually made me want to try to change my life. I haven't felt something like that since probably Kurosawa's other film, Ikaru. Both films deal with a similar theme about life and just kind of using your career to help others. And so I thought this would be a great film to share on Christmas, just seeing how there isn't too many Japanese movies that are about the holiday. And so, according to probably just me, I now declare that Ikaru and Redbeard are officially Christmas movies. Unfortunately, this film isn't remembered with the same full of hope tone that the movie goes for. In fact, this film is a stain in both Mifune and Kurosawa's careers. And it might just so happen to be the sole reason for perhaps the greatest breakup in cinema history. This film ended a great friendship. Redbeard released in 1965. It was directed by Akira Kurosawa, and it's his last film to star Toshiro Mifune. This ends 16 films together. It's also Kurosawa's last black and white movie. The film itself is over 3 hours long, and it does have a slower pace, and this may make it harder for some viewers to sit through it, but for those who do stick around and watch the entire thing, I will say it is worth it. It's a somewhat familiar story. It deals with the young being brought into the world by the experienced. So, the story follows a Dr. Yasumoto. He's kind of a young and arrogant doctor who ends up getting stuck working at this non-profit hospital that's run by the head doctor, named Redbeard. At first, he doesn't want to work there, and he does everything he can in his power to resist doing anything. But then he gets drawn in bit by bit, and it begins with an encounter with this kind of mentally damaged woman, played by the famous Kyoko Kagawa, and she assists in making one of the best scenes in this film. Yasumoto observes Redbeard at work, and at times the work that he does is a bit too much, but over time he does begin to understand and become a better doctor. Then Dr. Yasumoto finds a girl who is struck with a fever, and she also has a very repressive mother. Yasumoto then takes her under his care, and this kind of leads into the second half of the film. So the thing about this story that kind of caught me off guard was I thought it would be more of a focus on just the relationship between Dr. Yasumoto and Redbeard, but instead it focuses more on just the stories of the patients. It ends up being interesting as we get to see multiple stories with the different patients, but I do wish there was more of a focus just on the relationship between the two doctors. I do wish that the subplot with the mentally damaged woman that lures men to their death with her beauty was explored a bit more. Mainly because I felt that was a really interesting concept, but instead it kinda just gets dropped. The film itself is based on Shigeru Yamamoto's 1959 short story collection. And apparently all those stories have to do with a similar theme that we see in this film. So, as I mentioned in my top 10 Kurosawa films video, when I first saw Redbeard, it impacted me so much that there was actually a time when I wanted to be a doctor, just from seeing this film. The main reason for this, I think, is that Mifune's character of Redbeard is just what all doctors should be, but sadly in real life they aren't. He's calm, he's collected, he cares for others, but he does his job for the sole reason of helping others. Instead, I see a lot of doctors that just want to profit off of the patients, and that happens way too often. Redbeard, though, runs this non-profit health clinic, and he just devotes all of his time to helping these people who can't afford medicine. Redbeard is what I consider by all means a good doctor, but he does have a darker side, and those who stand in the way of his work will get this.
下手な医者の手にかかると命が危ないというではないか。わしは命は取らないが、東の日本屋3番。
I just love how Redbeard can seem so caring one moment, and then as soon as you cross him, he could just transform into a complete badass. It goes without saying that the scene with him kicking ass is probably my favorite scene in the film. And this scene was kind of like Kurosawa not being able to resist not putting a fight scene in the movie, considering that the rest of the film is rather tame and it relies more on being thought-provoking instead of having action. But this scene does reveal a lot about Mifune's character Redbeard. He seems like someone that is trying to escape their pasts and just become a new person. But every now and then, that old self will make an appearance, given when the opportunity arises. Redbeard is truly a fascinating character, and I think Mifune portrays his character as well as he could. Unfortunately though, not everyone thought this when the film first released, and this may be the sole reason for one of the biggest breakups in cinema history. So, in the book Waiting on the Weather, Making Movies with Akira Kurosawa, the author writes that after the completion of Redbeard, the co-screenwriter Hideo Aguni remarked to Kurosawa that Mifune's performance was all wrong. The author doesn't really explain Aguni's comment or why he made this remark. Instead, the author just writes about Aguni telling Kurosawa that Mifune is all wrong, and that Mifune had not correctly understood the role. She then continues by writing that Shigeru Yamamoto, the author of the original Redbeard book, had apparently cautioned Kurosawa not to forget that the lead character is someone with a deep wound in his soul. But he ended up praising Kurosawa after the film was released. I think that the Aguni comment is not really the reason why Kurosawa and Mifune never worked together again. It may have influenced the outcome, but based on the book The Emperor's Men, it seems to me that Kurosawa's Hollywood detour had more to do with it. Like I said before, I don't find anything wrong with his performance. At first he's a bit cold towards the young doctor, and he's just very direct. But later on, he warms up and becomes a bit more of a father figure to the protagonist. Also, when I rewatched this film, I noticed something new that I didn't notice the first time. There's this scene later on where Yasumoto meets his soon-to-be bride. You can see that Redbeard is just really excited about the whole thing and he wants everything to be perfect. He even shows concern about how long Yasumoto is keeping his bride waiting. He even tries to keep the formalities of who is supposed to talk when and where. It's subtle, but I found this to be really nice and it just shows the human side of the character. And Mifune just completely transformed into this role, and I felt that he got better in this role as the film went on. I think the problem with the character, if there is one, is that Kurosawa didn't intend to follow Yamamoto's novel. In the novel, Redbeard had apparently been emotionally wounded in the past. Instead, the film just suggests something else about the character, namely that Redbeard does things he isn't really proud of. We see hints of this when he blackmails this rich customer to pay more, or even the scene of him beating up the gangsters. But from the audience's point of view, nothing he does is really bad. It's all just for the greater good so that he can continue to run his nonprofit clinic. Perhaps the only flaw is that he doesn't have enough flaws. I would have liked more backstory and just something that showed that he had a bit of a darker side. But this is obviously not what Kurosawa wanted. It's safe to say that Akira Kurosawa made Toshiro Mifune a star. He gave him a reputation that grew with the role of a cop in Stray Dog, the bandit in Rashomon, and the farmer-turned-warrior in Seven Samurai. He went on to take the title leads in both Yojimbo and Sanjuro, but he ended his association with the director with Redbeard. But why something so perfect as a pair came to an end well before the deaths of the actor and director has long been a subject of speculation. According to the book The Emperor and the Wolf, The Lives and Films of Akira Kurosawa and Toshiro Mifune, the author states that the artistic benefits of working with Kurosawa were outweighed by the overwhelming business concerns that constantly plagued Mifune, and that Kurosawa felt betrayed and refused to understand how the actor could appear in what he called inferior films. Kurosawa was famous for monopolizing those he needed and dropping those he didn't. Mifune was not alone in being neglected. The initial breakup happens because the actor led an expensive life and he needed extra money. Yet he had faithfully worn his red beard and remained otherwise jobless for the many months it took to complete that film, which was notoriously behind schedule. He then had to scramble to find work no matter where it was. Kurosawa ended up resenting what he saw, and he viewed it as a betrayal. Much later, when the breakup was permanent and Ron was being readied, it was suggested to the director that Mifune was the right age for the role. The director turned and said that he would not work with anyone who had appeared in the likes of the TV series Shogun. A statement that's a bit unfair since Kurosawa had practically driven this actor to such extremes by keeping him otherwise jobless for so long. Other alternative reasons why Mifune did not appear in Ron might have been that the producers found him too expensive. Their falling out marked the gradual decline of both men. Mifune kept on acting until 1995, 2 years before his death. But these roles gave little indication of his incredible presence and skill that we've seen in the Kurosawa films. The Bandit of Rashomon, the Thief in the Lower Depths, the Avenger in The Bad Sleep Well, it still seemed impossible that they were all played by the same person. Toward the end of his life, he simply was just saying his lines, or probably already suffering from Alzheimer's disease, and basically just trying to remember his lines. Kurosawa died in 1998, 9 months after Mifune, and the later pictures, with the exceptions of Kagemusha and Ron and a few others, never really equaled the films up to and including Redbeard. After the breakup, the director also experienced increased difficulties that were both financial and personal. Here's some random facts about the film I'd also like to mention. Kurosawa's desire for authenticity for this film led to having the hospital get stocked with expensive medical supplies of the time period that the film took place in. Even though the cabinets were never seen or referred to in the film, they still were filled with pills. Period piece construction of the hospital went as far as to use the right kind of aged wood that would have been used in the region at the time the film was set, and this was at Kurosawa's request. The clinic was built based on the modeling of the Toshikawa nursing home, which was built in 1722. Original blueprints for the structure were uncovered and used as well. Before filming the flashback scenes where Sahachi is dying in Redbeard's clinic, Kurosawa played the last movement of Ludwig Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. He used the song to instruct the cast that this was how he wanted the audience to feel when watching this scene. It was actually the first scene that was filmed in the movie, and it helped set the tone for the rest of the film. Mifune usually appeared in several films a year for Toho. He did many cameos and guest roles. However, he chose not to do any that year as he filmed this movie, allowing himself to be fully immersed in what would be his last film for Akira Kurosawa. Principal photography for the film took 2 years. This is also the only Kurosawa film to feature nudity, and you see this during the surgery scene. As was typical for work with Kurosawa, the composer Masaru Sato was only given 1 week to compose the film's entire score. Kurosawa is known for using weather effects in his films to set the mood. In this film, the lighthearted scenes are accompanied by snow. Also, like in all of Kurosawa's films, there's rain. It's used in the scenes where Yasumoto meets one of his patients. So in the end, I was emotionally moved by Redbeard, and in ways that most films just can't do. Some films overpower you with drama just to mark its points, but Redbeard dives into questions that other films wouldn't raise. Like, why is a clinic that helps low-class people who can't afford medicine so underpaid? Why is there even a lower class to begin with? The conclusion at the end is a bit typical, but it's still powerful enough to move you. It's definitely one of Kurosawa's better films. I will say though, if you've never seen a Kurosawa film before, there's better films to watch before watching this one. But it does end up being a treat for those that are already familiar with his work and are ready to dive into a 3-hour trip into a world that may seem familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Together, Akira Kurosawa and Toshiro Mifune made magic. They had a friendship so strong they could move mountains. They created something that can never be produced again. The biggest message that I get out of this film is that friends are a great thing to have. And they can change your life, and they can mean a matter of life and death. But like with everything, there's a time limit, so cherish it. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, and have a Merry Christmas.